Hi everyone, it's Nicole, and I am finally back with what I read in the year of 2020. And I was right, I was only up to June. So I'm going to be working on my June reads for 2020. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to at least once a week work on the books that I read in 2020, and then as soon as January's done, so next week, I'm going to do what I read in January 2021 because I don't want to fall behind in what I read in 2021, but I want to catch up. My goal is to catch up by the end of February. I'm going to get all the books that I read in 2020. So one of the challenges for my Patreon girls was to make a layout about all your scrappy goals for 2021. And one of my scrappy goals, well, a couple of my scrappy goals were to finish all the books that, my album of all the books that I read in 2020. And of course, keep up with what I read in 2021, but also to work on my December daily from 2019 and then my December daily from 2020. So I listed quite a few projects that I absolutely want to finish this year, and I'm tackling one at a time. So the first one I'm tackling is the books that I read in 2020. So I'll finish that, and once that's finished, then I'm going to work on my December daily of 2019. So I find I do much better if I only focus on, a project at a time. So for this month and the month of February, I'm going to be focusing on my books to read that I read in 2020. And it had been such a long time since I worked on that I did go through some of my digital prints, and this is the 1.5-inch circle. And then I found a stamp that I had that I barely had used, and it just had a bunch, like a little shelf of books, and it says reading. I'm going to cut out some labels, and I'm going to punch some viewfinders in the 1-inch size, the 1.5-inch size, and I think a 2-inch size. And one good thing was that when I went, because I have an iris container that has all the stuff that I use for this project, and I had printed the pictures of the books that I read for June and July. And then I also cut out some little books that I had stamped out with the number, because I like to, in my album, I like to have the books in the order that I read them. So from 1 to 100, because I read 100 books this year, and I put that number directly on the book, and they're put in my album in the order that I read the book. And that was already done for June and July, so that's good. So another thing that I want to do this week is just make sure that I print out the rest of the books for August, September, October, November, and December, because that was a huge time saver when I started to work on this morning, was that was already done. So then I just chose one of my Project Life card collection, and then I just chose 3x4 cards for each of the photos or for the books, and I just made sure that it coordinated somewhat. So another thing I'm going to do is when I start a specific month, I'm going to choose some digital files, but I'm going to choose digital files from all one color family. Or what I can do is the ones that I didn't use for the month of June, I can still use them for the month of July. But I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time looking for stuff and cutting stuff out. So as you saw, I took a whole bunch of 1.5-inch circle, and I stamped them all at once. Then I took some 1-inch viewfinders. I took a bunch of labels, 1.5-inch viewfinders, and the 2-inch. And now that's going to be kept in my iris container, and then I can use them over and over again. But every month I'm going to try and add a different color. And then eventually I'll have, quite a few colors that I'll have a whole bunch of them cut out and ready to go. Another thing I did was I'm going to choose one font for that month because it is a 2-page spread that is in a 12 by 12 album. If I don't read a lot of books, there's a lot of empty slots, and I like to fill them in with different, sayings that are bookish. So the first book that I read in the month of June was called The Last Letter by Rebecca Yarros, and this is about 2 military friends that are in the military together, and it's about, it's well known that they will write last letters, and he wrote it to his friend, and it's how he asked him that, if you're reading this, then you survived and I didn't, and I ask you if you could please take care of my sister who has, I think 2 kids, and I can't remember if it's twins, but 2 kids, and she's a single mom and she's going to need some help. So a big part of the story is about the friend and the sister and the relationship that they build. And it was heart-wrenching. It was heartwarming at other times, but I absolutely love this book. This was a 5-star read for me, and I could see myself rereading this book at some point. Now, the next book I read was Rebel by Marie Lu, and that was part of the Legend world. It wasn't part of the original series. It was quite a few years later, and it follows the main character in the Legend trilogy, Day. It follows his little brother, and it came like years and years later. And it was fun. I really enjoyed the Legend trilogy. So it was fun to go back into this world and follow Eden, which was the brother of Day. And he was quite a bit older. I think it was 10 years later. But it was fun to be back in that world. And I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed the first trilogy, and I enjoyed that extra book to get back into this world. It's fun when you are kind of involved or invested in some of the characters, and then you get to spend time with them again. The next book I read was Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. Now, the first book I read by Jay Kristoff, or the series, was the Illuminae series, which I absolutely love, and I knew that anything that Jay Kristoff would write, I would want to read. And this was no different. I absolutely love this book. It follows a killer, Mia, which she ends up going to like a killer school. And so it's all about them training, and she wants to, be a better killer because she has a vengeance. Like, she wants to get vengeance on somebody that caused her grief in the past. And this was 5 stars. Now, I have to say, I haven't read the other books in the series yet, which I plan on reading God's Grave in the month of February, because I want to make sure that I keep up on the series that I read. The next book is Beach Read by Emily Henry, and this was an adult contemporary, and it's about 2 authors that are kind of in a slump. They have a writer's block, and so they are both at a beach house, and they're trying to come up with their next book. So what they decide to do is write each other's genre. I think he's more like literary fiction and she's more contemporary. So they decide to write each other's genre to try to get out of the slump. And it's about their, romance, budding romance. And it's kind of an enemy to lovers story. A lot of people this year, that was a 5-star book for them. For me, it was like a 4-star book. I enjoyed it. It wasn't anything like super wow, but I really enjoyed it. And I will read other books by Emily Henry. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm writing with my right hand. So I'll talk about that more at the end of this, just because I want to keep up with the books that are on the screen. So the next book is Final Girls by Riley Sager. And this is a thriller. And it was about, every time, if there's a big like murder act, and there was one final girl, in the movies and stuff, the one final girl that survives. Well, this is about a group of final girls that have survived, and this is years later, and all of a sudden they start dying one by one, and at first it looks like it might be suicide, but then all of a sudden is it suicide or is it not? So that was really good. I enjoyed that book. It was a 4-star read for me. I think this was my first Riley Sager book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The next book I read was Blue Lily, Lily Blue by Maggie Stiefvater, and this is about a group of friends that are looking for the ley line and a king, and it's about 5 friends, Blue, Gansey, Ronan, Adam, and Noah, and their adventure looking for this. And I absolutely love the entire series. This was a 5-star for me, and I truly enjoyed the entire series. And the next book I read is from a new series, but it's a continuation of the 7 series by Cinda Williams-Chama. This is called Flamecaster, obviously by the same author. And this is several years later, and it follows the kids of the first series. And I absolutely love this book. It was a 5-star read. I love the 7 series. This is called the Shattered Realm series. And I love all the new characters, and we have some of our old characters. This book broke my heart. But when an author can keep you reading over 2 series, it's 9 books altogether, and 5 books in the 7 realms and 4 books in the Shattered Realms. And if they can keep you entertained and into that book that much, it's a sign of a good series. I don't want to say too much about the book because this is the first book in the 2nd series, but I don't want to spoil the first series. So, like I said, I only read, I think it was 7 books in the month of June. So that means that there's going to be lots of empty spaces. So what I decided to do was get a few more 4x6 Project Life cards, and I'm just going to put little sayings that are kind of related to books, and I'm going to use the same thickers and then a small alpha. And the first card is going to say, "Today is booked." So I ended up speeding this up a little bit more because now I've kind of talked about all the books, and this, I still want to show you the cards that I made to put in the album, but there's not really any books to talk about. So I just go through my reading planner journal, and I just find different little saying. And this one is going to say reading is an adventure. So same thing. I'm going to use the Thickers Alpha and then a smaller sticker letter. And again, I'm not going to end up changing it. I'm going to keep it consistent for those 2-page spread, and then maybe the next one, in July, I'll change maybe the letters, but I'm going to keep it consistent for 1 month, because these are taking me between an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half to 2 hours. We'll say between an hour and a half to 2 hours to get these done. And where I have, 7 months to do, and then keep up with what I'm reading this year, I want to make sure that I don't spend too many hours on this. So I'm going to try and really narrow it down and just use a few colors per month. So ever since I took my cast off, I have been working on my writing and writing every day, and so that I could do journaling on things like this, because for me to just do the little bit of embellishing and then putting everything in the album, I knew I was never going to get to it again. I just know myself that when I do something, I have to work on it right away and just get the whole thing done, or it's going to be months and months and months before I get back to it. So ever since December 16th, I've been practicing my writing, and finally it's at a point where it doesn't look like chicken scratch anymore. So I'm able to start my journaling. So another thing I'm going to be doing this year is journaling on my layouts. But that's it. That's going to complete my June reads. And I want to thank you so much for watching. Bye.